Happening now on Grid Tonight. Another Supercars driver is coming stateside to compete in the NASCAR Cup Series. Can Brodie Kostecki do the same thing as Shane van Gisbergen by winning on debut? IndyCar announced updates to the rear wheel bearing retaining nut in response to Kyle Kirkwood's flying wheel over the catch fence in the Indianapolis 500. Was it a smart decision to introduce these changes in Iowa this upcoming weekend instead of waiting until next year? Meanwhile, GT World Challenge Europe is headed to Saudi Arabia in 2024. Does it even make sense for a European-based sports car racing championship to be racing in the Middle East? Hello to all our viewers watching here in the United States and around the world. Welcome to Grid Tonight, your weekly motorsports news program. I'm Kobe Lambert from the Podium Finish. With me, Jonathan Fiel from the Racing Experts and Matt White from Grid Endurance Performance Index. And for some reason, this thing kept looping. I forgot.
Yeah, I like the music.
It's good. Yeah. Yeah, we definitely encourage everyone to comment in the chat below and ask questions you may have. Your StreamYard updated, and I forgot, and it's really weird with the loop there. But hey, you got a little extra music there. And with that said, Matt, take it away with our top story this evening.
Yeah, thank you, Kobe. Yes, we like a little tune from time to time. Don't forget to get your comments in. We've got all the usual bits and pieces coming up for you later on in the show. Hots and Knots, an EPI update, and pick a winner to come. But we will start with the top story of the week. And as you said, Kobe, another Repco Supercars Championship driver is heading your way stateside. Erebus Motorsports' Brodie Kostecki will make his NASCAR Cup Series debut next month. Kostecki will drive the number 33 Chevrolet for Richard Childress Racing in the Verizon 200 at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway on the road course with sponsorship from Mobile X. Before making a name for himself in Supercars, Kostecki moved to the United States in 2011 to compete in the USAC Ford Focus Series. He won 3 national championships and 27 feature races, so plenty of oval experience to his name. He was just 15 years old when he won a late model race at Rockingham Speedway, North Carolina. No, not Rockingham, Northamptonshire, but Rockingham, North Carolina. On that day, he beat two drivers who would later go on to make it to the Cup Series, Ty Dillon and Bubba Wallace. Kostecki also became the first non-American driver to win at Rockingham. In what's known now as the Arca Menard Series East today, Kostecki made a total of 16 starts, 2 pole positions, 1 at Iowa and 1 at Watkins Glen, 1 top 5 and 4 top 10 finishes. Kostecki said it's been a lifelong goal to compete in the Cup Series and believes this additional seat time will help him in his quest to win the Supercars Championship later this year, graphic courtesy of Brodie Kostecki himself. Does Kostecki's prior knowledge of how things work in NASCAR world shorten the learning curve, Jonathan, and how exciting is it to see another Supercars driver make the jump?
Oh, it's very exciting. I think recent years we've really seen that crossover more and more between, like the different disciplines of motorsport, whether that's, IndyCar and NASCAR, whether that's Australian Supercars and NASCAR. And now we're seeing it with Brodie Kostecki. Really interesting. Corey LaJoie actually served as Brodie Kostecki's crew chief when he made some K&M Pro Series East starts, now called ARCA East. I just still think that those starts back then, especially the series that it was in, I think it'll help some, but I think there'll still be some things to learn. I mean, especially, like what Denny Hamlin touched on about how, Shane van Gisbergen had to come and learn a new style of car with driving on the opposite side, having to shift, in different ways. I imagine like Brodie will probably catch on again, considering he has that experience of racing in the US and racing on the left side, driving on the left side. But I think it'll be, what am I saying? I think he's going to do well. I don't think he's going to do Shane van Gisbergen well, but we'll touch on that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's going to be interesting to see how he gets on. Of course, as we've said, plenty of NASCAR related experience. And that's a bit different to kind of SVG's Chicago run, of course, because everyone was new to the track there, whereas the whole of the Cup Series field has plenty of experience at Indy over the last couple of years on the road course. Good evening to Casey, who says Hailie Deegan will be on the pole for SRX at Stafford tomorrow. Stafford 2, of course. with the rain out this week. So we'll be talking about that in Pick a Winner later on. Tony Stewart starts second and Paul Tracy third. Thank you, Casey, for those live updates here on Grid Tonight. Good evening to Adam as well. Says this is awesome for Brodie. I see him getting a top 10 finish. I have to agree with you, actually. I think he's going to be up there. If we saw what happened to Shane a couple of weeks ago in Chicago. This is all an Erebus link that they've got going with RCR. RCR own a former Erebus supercar from the previous generation. Kyle Busch and Austin Dillon have been driving it in preparation for the upcoming road courses through the summer. So there's a link there. Barry Ryan, the Erebus Supercars team boss, is probably touched down by now, because I heard him this morning talking on an Australian podcast that he was on his way over to the Slates this week to touch down with Richard Childress and chat through their sort of technical alliance that they've got going on. So all intermingling things between Erebus and Richard Childress Racing, which is great to see. Kostecki will become the second supercar driver to compete in NASCAR this year, as we mentioned, at Chicago, despite not having any stock car experience or familiarity with the NASCAR environment. Shane van Gisbergen made things look very easy indeed. Fastest in practice, third on the grid, and joined the shortlist of drivers to win in their Cup Series debut. Like SVG, Kostecki will be in good equipment capable of winning. RCR has won 2 road course races last season with Tyler Reddick at Road America and, ironically, at IMS, which is where Kostecki will have his run. Kostecki will also have 2 teammates to learn on with Austin Dillon and Kyle Busch, as we mentioned. Does SVG's one-off Cup win put pressure on Kostecki to win at Indianapolis next month, Jonathan?
I think certainly. I think it definitely puts a lot of pressure on him, just considering it shows that the learning curve between NASCAR and supercars really isn't as, big as some people may think it is. But then again, I think you also have to consider just the type of driver that Shane van Gisbergen is. I mean, we've talked about his stats a lot on here, and just the amount of wins he has, the amount of championships he has, the beast of a driver that he is, words of drivers, not specifically myself. So I think there's some pressure, but also you got to consider too that Kostecki is somewhat of a rookie in his own right. I mean, this is his 3rd full-time season in V8 Supercar, Repco Supercars. Still remember it from back when Daryl, Larry, and Mike were down in Australia, and back in those days, there was some fun days on speed. But I think that just with him being such a young Supercars racer, I think he gets a little bit of leeway. I think there's going to be some pressure on him, but I think this is just all about seeing what he can do and seeing how this performance will stack up to see what Shane van Gisbergen did at Chicago. And also there's the factor of Indy not being a new track either.
Yeah, and Kostecki I'm sure, will have had and will have plenty of sim time, so he'll have plenty of track knowledge going into the weekend. Shane said after the race, didn't he, at Chicago, there's plenty of guys in supercars that can come over and do just as good of a job that I did, and Kostecki is second in the points after the last week at Townsville, so he's up there with Shane in the championship battle, which is going to run between the Erebus team and Red Bull and Pole Racing. With gaps in the supercar schedule, it's easier for Van Gisbergen and Kostecki to find time to travel to America and race in NASCAR. However, with the 36 Cup Series points races, 2 exhibitions, it's harder for the NASCAR guys to make the trip the other way, and especially if that requires leaving the country for a week or so to get down there to a race. The only supercars race weekend that wouldn't conflict with a Cup Series race in the whole of the year is the championship deciding Adelaide Velo 500 in November. We've seen 2 supercars drivers come to NASCAR, but would it be cool to see a supercars team field a wildcard entry at Adelaide for a Cup driver? Jonathan, the floor is yours. Which NASCAR driver would you like to go and see go the other way? And if it was to be Adelaide, go and stink up the show at Adelaide potentially.
So move your head real quick. Just do it real quick. Over to
wrong way.
A little bit
that
over
one there.
There you go. A little bit more over that way.
Him.
Keep going. Him. Exactly.
Yes.
Kyle Larson. Yeah, you knew what I was getting at there. Kyle Larson. Absolutely. Because we have seen how he can jump in a shopping cart and outrun a Lamborghini. I mean, he is a phenomenal race car driver who's versatile, can run anything, and be successful. I mean, he's going to do the Indianapolis 500 next year. I mean, with how young he is too, I think it bodes well for his chances. I think a guy like Tyler Reddick, who has really taken a liking to the Gen 7 car. I mean, his teammate called him Road Course Jesus, so why not export him to Australia and see what he can do, you know? So he could be NASCAR's missionary, I guess you could say. Chase Elliott, I think, is another one. Kyle Busch. I mean, they're both phenomenal talents, especially Elliott on the road courses.
We had a small inkling of what it might be like 10, 12 years ago now, when the Gold Coast race had all the international co-drivers, and we had the likes of Dario Franchitti and Ricky Taylor and all of the IMSA guys and a couple of IndyCar guys go down there and co-drive. That was cool. Unfortunately, it went away. If you're asking me, I'd probably go with Kyle as well. I'd like to see the other Kyle go and try it, Kyle Busch, because when, you know, if Kyle's in a good car and on a good day, he would probably go well. The only problem we kind of have to use a Supercars kind of paraphernalia on this is they have their own super license. We talked about it a lot last year with Formula One and Colton Herta and all of the things that then never happened. But the Supercars series has its own super license thing. And Joey Mawson, who has just won, or the last 2 years has won their kind of big single-seater championship S5000. They call it the Australian Gold Star. It's like the big medal to get down there. He couldn't get a super license because he hadn't competed in enough Supercars events or on their ladder. He didn't have enough points to get a license to get a co-driver at Bathurst. That's thankfully been overturned, so we can get to see that. But unfortunately, as much as we'd like to see some NASCAR guys go down and do it, I think they've kind of cornered themselves with closing the door on it. We saw James Hinchcliffe and Alex Rossi go and do Bathurst when was that, 2019, in the Napa wild card. Unfortunately, it ended with them in the gravel trap. But yeah, it'd be good to see another crop of people go down. If you're watching live, drop us some comments in there, and we can see who you would like to go and see down there. Adam has also done that. He agrees with you, Jonathan, and would like to see Chase Elliott go and give a supercar a whirl. The Menards shopping cart versus a Lambo would be fun. Yeah, Van Gisbergen and Larson in that. Just put them in shopping carts and let them race around the Walmart car park, and they'd show us a good race, just the two of them in some trolleys. That is for sure. So we'll keep abreast of SVG and potential other things and what happens to Brodie at Indianapolis in, what's that, 3 or 4 weeks time now, isn't it? Mid-August, when the IndyCar series and the NASCAR series come together at Indianapolis. And talking of Indianapolis and talking of IndyCar, let's move on to our second story tonight. And we go back to the 500 after Carl Kirkwood's tyre, of course, went dramatically flying over the catch fence at the Indianapolis 500 a couple of months ago. IndyCar and Dallara have announced updates to improve the overall strength and retention of wheel hubs moving forward, starting this weekend at the Hy-Vee doubleheader at Iowa Speedway. An updated rear wheel bearing retaining nut will be distributed to all the IndyCar teams this week. Tests show that the new update is 60% stronger than the old one. As you can see on your screen, you can see the difference in the two retainers there. IndyCar President Jay Fry said Dallara continues to be a tremendous partner, praising them for conducting a thorough review to find out why Kirkwood's wheel came over so easily following contact with the spinning Felix Rosenquist in turn 2 at Indianapolis. Dallara went to work immediately to update this part, and you see on the screen at their headquarters over in Italy. Fry also added that IndyCar takes safety very seriously and considered this an important step to ensure something scary like this never happens again. Previously, an initial review determined that the wheel tether system using high-performance nylon material didn't fail. Stefano Di Ponte, CEO of Dallara, said it's their mission to maintain and continuously improve safety based upon the highest standards. Dallara concluded the situation with Kirkwood's tyre was unusual. This never happened before, and hopes the stronger components will prevent a repeat of this incident. Graphic on screen courtesy of IndyCar. So, Kobe, bringing you back in, and Jonathan as well. How confident do you feel with IndyCar and Dallara's decision to announce this updated part now instead of waiting until the winter break ready for next season?
I feel very confident in IndyCar and Dallara's decision to make this change now, especially since we're going to an oval track this weekend where this happened. If this had happened somewhere like on a road course, it probably wouldn't have went. Well, depending on where they were on the track, probably wouldn't have went. Over the fence in the area where fans could have gotten struck. But at Iowa Speedway, that's a great possibility that something like this could have happened again. Although the chances are really, really low. And what we saw at the Indy 500 was certainly a freak accident, and it was unfortunate that it happened. But for things to change, you need things like this to happen. And I'm glad that IndyCar and Dallara reacted very swiftly to this. And Dallara went back to the lab in Italy and did a thorough review and decided that this graphic you see right here on the screen was the best course of action to try to update the rear wheel bearing retaining nut to make sure that we're not going to see a tire fly off the car so easily again and go over to catches and potentially hurt or even kill some spectators. So I think IndyCar absolutely made the right decision here to make these changes ahead of the High V doubleheader race weekend at Iowa Speedway. And before I turn things over to Jonathan, got some news right here from Casey Campbell that we all saw earlier in the week from the Indy Next. But Mattia Nannini and Juncos Hollinger Racing have parted ways, so that means that JHR has parted ways with two drivers. They started the season with a lot of musical chairs for Juncos Hollinger Racing and Indy Next. And I saw on their social media pages today that we should expect to see an announcement from the team this Friday. Maybe they're going to be announcing who's the replacement driver is, or maybe some 2024 IndyCar silly season news will be answered. I know they would like to keep Callum Ilott and Augustin Canapino for next season, but we'll see how the market holds.
Yeah, so going back to what you were talking about with the rules change that got made, with having to have that specific wheel nut on there, I think it was great to see that IndyCar and Dallara acted so quickly to be able to get that institute. Because like you were talking about, fan safety is paramount. And if if that accident had happened at some place like Iowa, it could have been really catastrophic. And I think it also is interesting just to see like what caused it, because Will Power was in a media availability today and he talked about how the tether worked, but it was such a strong force that it ripped off one of the suspension parts that held the assembly in place and of course shot it over the fence. So as much as we want to control safety and we want to make these races and the race cars and all the parts and pieces as safe as possible, the simple fact of it is when you're going over 200 miles per hour, over 220 miles per hour, anything can happen. I mean, the laws of physics are way up, and it's kind of like throwing a bunch of cards up in the air and just kind of hoping for the best. But the best part is IndyCar and Dallara, they're able to take that data that they acquired through that crash and they learn and they get something like what you see there. So I think it's just another step toward improving the safety, understanding, building that database of like, how do we make this car safer? Because as much as we hate to say it, like there's going to be another instance where we're going to find something, there's going to be something that comes up and the series adjusts, the parts makers adjust, and they did a good job. I think they did a really good job adjusting to what this situation brought to them.
Yeah, absolutely. Don't disagree with anything you guys have said. And this is a 230, well, in the case of the Indianapolis 500, it's a 230 miles an hour science experiment, isn't it? So when things go wrong, we need to get on top of them, figure out why they've gone wrong and improve. And that's what Dallara have done. Dallara have been obviously with the IndyCar series for a long, long time, and a lot of innovation has come through the last few years from them as well. So it's good to see that is continuing. And just because we're going to a little small track like Iowa this weekend, don't forget last year we had that big wreck for Joseph Newgarden on the Sunday, which he had a concussion or some kind of medical incident afterwards in the paddock after the race. So they are really still traveling around there, and looking forward to IndyCar at the weekend. It's going to be a big event with High V again, with their massive a pot of money that they've thrown at the race, and with the big concerts as well on both days. So looking forward to, after a good race Toronto was, we might get to that in Hots and Knots later on, but another IndyCar doubleheader this weekend. Looking very much forward to that. So that's the IndyCar portion of the show done. Jonathan, time to hand over to you for our hot topic this evening.
Yeah, so time to talk about a little bit of sports car racing. Of course, a few weeks ago during the 24 Hours of Spa race weekend, the SRO released the schedules for its GT World Challenge Series. For the 2024 GT World Challenge Europe provisional calendar, it shows a 10-race schedule with a surprise that caught some people off guard. The Endurance Cup season finale will take place at the Jeddah Corniche Circuit in Saudi Arabia on November 21st to the 23rd. Now, here's the interesting part. It will be a 1,000-kilometer event, and it'll begin a whole new long-term partnership between the SRO and Saudi Arabia. Of course, a lot of different sports ventures, F1, WWE have been investing in Saudi Arabia. So, of course, sports cars got to get their interest in there. So a European championship basically heading to the Middle East to race in a country that has constantly been accused of sports washing to distract from its human rights violations. And, of course, you see the photo there. That is courtesy of the FIA. I mean, it's been a topic that's come up a lot with, we talked about F1 last year when, you had a bomb go off in the background of Formula One practice, and you talk about other sports that have competed. There has been some controversy, things like that. Do you think it makes sense for the GT World Challenge Europe to be racing in Saudi Arabia? And what do you think about this and the growing motorsport scene?
Well, Jonathan, before I answer your question, I wanted to add one more point from the IndyCar section in terms of safety at Iowa Speedway. Remember, several years ago, Colton Herta went airborne during a crash on a restart there. So yeah. So to your point, Matt, although I was a shorter track, the speeds are not as high as they would be at Texas Motor Speedway or Indianapolis. The danger at Iowa Speedway is still real in an IndyCar because they're still going insanely fast and pulling a lot of G's, even on a short track at those speeds. But to start to answer your question about Saudi Arabia, like you said, it's a European-based championship racing in the Middle East. I don't really understand that, to be honest. I mean, we all know it's due to business reasons that we don't even have to really say out loud. I'd understand it a lot more if it was GT World Challenge Asia, since we've seen some Asian-based championships dip their toe in the water over there. But for GT World Challenge Europe, I'm not really understanding why it's beneficial for a European-based sports car racing championship to be venturing over to that side of the world, as they have their reasons. And it's certainly been interesting to see the motorsport scene grow in Saudi Arabia or just the Middle East in general. I know it seems like every time on the Grit Tonight show, each time a race is announced in this specific region, we're always talking about it. We talked about the racing in Qatar. We talked about Saudi Arabia in the past, and here we are talking about Saudi Arabia again. And to a lot of motorsports fans, which it seems like I'm not sure if it's a super majority, but certainly it seems like at least a majority of motorsports fans feel like competing in Saudi Arabia is a moral and ethical issue. Like what will our morals and ethics allow us to do? But as we've seen with several racing series, GT World Challenge Europe, Formula One, Formula E, and then you have the World Endurance Championships going to be racing at Qatar next year, I believe, to kick off the 2024 season. Yeah, so it shows you that basically where these sanctioning bodies are nowadays when they decide to go to places like Saudi Arabia and Qatar. And I'm sure a lot of people in the GT World Challenge Europe paddock are not going to be pleased about this addition to the schedule, a 1,000-kilometer event on the streets of Jeddah.
Yeah, I think you're right there, Kobe, from what was said post the announcement of this. I think it was on the Friday morning of the Spa 24 Hours weekend at the end of last month. Matthew Owens, good evening, Matthew. More sports in Saudi Arabia, just what we need more of. Yeah, Jonathan touched on it, actually. WWE's been there, boxing, of course, the whole live golf thing. Newcastle United Football Club pretty much owned by the Saudi Wealth Fund now. So Jordan Henderson signed from Liverpool today to go and play in the Saudi League next season, another one that they've poached. So follow the money. but yes, the race was announced. The teams, there was some grumblings around over the weekend of Spa about, well, this isn't what we kind of signed up for as all European-based teams. They are going to be subsidised to go. It's by the sound of things, so there will be something, but at the expense of one of the European races, and I think it's, from off the top of my head, I think it's Barcelona that's got the chop in the calendar. It's a 10-race series, as you said. It's 5 sprint rounds and 5 endurance rounds, including the Spa 24 hours. But it's not the first time that Stefan Rattel, who is the SR in SRO, has spread his wings. Just looking at the old calendars here, which I've got on my phone, in 2005, and back to before that, 2004, when it was a European-based championship, they went to Dubai and Zhuhai in China. In 2005, they went to Dubai and Bahrain, when Bahrain was a new track, and it held the final round. Dubai again in 2006. In 2007, they started in China, but then were mostly Europe. Then we had a trip to Argentina in 2008. This is all still as a European-based championship. 2009, it was all Europe. And then in 2010, we had the GT1 World Championship. So we went to Abu Dhabi. We went to Interlagos. We went to Argentina again. But even before Formula One went to Baku, we had the Baku City Challenge, which was an SRO organised event in 2012. And then they held races in the World Championship in 13 and 14 before F1 landed in Azerbaijan in 2015. So, not many people knew A, where Azerbaijan was, and B, where Baku was before F1 rocked up there. But Stefan was there a couple of years before that, holding some races on a different track, but it was still around the streets of Baku. So not the first time that they've done this. Interesting that it's Saudi. 1,000 kilometers is going to be a very long race around there. The general World Challenge Europe endurance races are 6 hours, apart from Spa, obviously. So it's going to be probably longer than 6 hours of 1,000 k's around there. It's going to be a long old lap. Hopefully we get plenty of cars up going, and I'm sure there'll be, as Cody mentioned, some of the Asian more local teams will rock up there and bolster the grid. Good evening to Upright Fossil. He says just got here, another ringer for a road course. Looking forward to it in relation to Brodie Kostecki, who was our top story tonight. Yeah, very much looking forward to that. But yeah, not the first time, probably not the last. And the dreaded sentence of follow the money will continue.
And before tossing it back over to Jonathan and answer, I wanted to bring up an additional point. When you see motorsports like this expanding in Saudi Arabia, it kind of worries me in the sense when you see other racing series around the world talking about international expansion. We know that it gets tossed around a lot in IndyCar. So Christian Lundgaard, the most recent winner on the streets of Toronto in IndyCar, talking about how he says that IndyCar needs to have at least one flyaway race on the schedule, and that IndyCar needs to be going overseas away from North America, not just competing in Toronto or even in Mexico. I know they'd really love to get a race in Mexico because of the fan base that Pato Award has, and that would be absolutely massive for IndyCar to race in Mexico as well as in Canada. But I think Lundgaard is talking about going racing in Europe or even Australia, because IndyCar has a fan base all over the world. But when you talk about international expansion, it has to make you worry a little bit that in February, are we going to see IndyCar racing someday in Jeddah and on the streets of Saudi Arabia there? And then Matt, you shared this with us earlier as well about supercars, potentially the rumors that they're potentially going to be racing on the streets of Singapore and going overseas for the first time in quite a handful of years. I'll say this point: I'd rather see supercars racing in Singapore than I would racing in Saudi Arabia. But if the schedule line and the Saudis are offering a dump truck load of money to supercars or IndyCar or whatever racing series, what's going to stop them from going to Saudi Arabia? Or even you have to throw Qatar in the mix as well, with all the racing series they've been able to attract. So certainly I'm sure Saudi Arabia is not done looking for other racing series. And I know some people were even concerned that at one point when Saudi Arabia was even considering starting up their own racing series.
I'll just add to go ahead, Matt. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was going to say on the Supercars Singapore thing. Yes, good. That's good that Supercars are going to Singapore. Yes, we do like that they're going there. It's not too far away, and we want them to spread their wings a little bit. But they've got no round in New Zealand at the moment. I mean, it's just across the water, and there's a massive fan base in New Zealand. And they've got the McLaughlin, Van Gisbergen. They've got some of the best drivers that have been through that championship in the last little while at the front end of it. So that's a shame. Why won't they go back to Winton or Queensland Raceway before they go to Singapore potentially? Singapore, if it happens, will probably be at the expense of the Sandown 500, which is back this year. But then is it going to go away again as the second enduro? So, and as I mentioned in our chat, that means it's going to be a second international race on a Grand Prix weekend, which probably won't be on the Supercars Superview package, which means lots of people won't be probably buying that to have 2 less rounds because we don't get Albert Park through that. And if they do an Albert Park copy, that means there'll be like 3 or 4 lap races, and that's no good for anybody, is it really?
Yeah, we'll pull. I saw there was a comment there from, I believe it was Adam, was talking about, the Repco Supercars may run alongside F1 at Singapore. Now, if you remember this, that would not be the first time where the Repco Supercars have gone internationally. If you remember, they did that race at COTA. I believe they did 1 or 2 races in COTA. I remember watching it on Speed. I have lots of memories from Speed Network back in the day. Good memories too. Personally editorializing here, I think if you're going to plan a race internationally, you have to think about the fan base that is there. I know that, and you can leave the 3 box on if you want, but I guess I'll go on my soapbox a little bit. So I personally think that if you're going to go internationally, you should build a fan base. You think of the fan base that's there, what's already there, and expand upon that. I understand that Saudi Arabia is going to bring a lot of money and with an event, which is why we've seen just about every sport, try out an event in Saudi Arabia. But I also think that, when you have fans in Europe, when you have fans in, obviously we're talking about the sports car series that's based in Europe. But when you're talking about like fans in certain places, you have to go where they are and start building that base up. Like you were talking about with IndyCar, like if they had a race in Saudi Arabia, I think that'd be very interesting. Obviously, it'd be a big moneymaker. But what fan base is there that you're going to be able to capitalize on? I think that's a big, and I think that's something that they've considered. And, they've talked about having races in those places. I mean, they've had races in Brazil, they've had races in Australia. Just being able to sustain that, making a moneymaker, being able to, sustain that fan base should be always paramount when you're considering an event like that.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't disagree with you. If IndyCar can't get to Mexico, it doesn't need to be looking anywhere else outside of the North American continent, really, at the minute either, does it? Like NASCAR, we should be in Canada, really. I know we haven't, especially since the Xfinity race at Montreal went away. That would be cool if they could get themselves up there. And even then, maybe we could have they've got Indianapolis, we could have a NASCAR IndyCar double at Mexico. That would be a great weekend. I'd be buying a ticket for that.
Yeah. And I mean, you talk about Repco Supercars with Kostecki and Van Gisbergen coming over to the US. They're kind of building up that interest from fans. Like, why not bring Supercars back to the US and try that out? And maybe something with NASCAR. There's definitely that relationship that seems to be building.
Yeah, maybe that's something that's a long way down in the pipeline, but maybe that there's a hot chance that we're going to lose lots of the supercar front runners to NASCAR full time. So maybe that's not something that they want to align themselves with in supercars land, because they'll end up with lots of drivers switching. Matthew, again, good evening to you. Very strong feeling that NASCAR will be back in Montreal next year in some way. I would love that. Those races at Montreal and the Xfinity Series were crazy at the end. That rain race was just madness. Danica hitting the shoe that was on the track. Carl Edwards running down the racetrack with his squeegee hanging out the window. Just cool, random things that we got at Montreal that we don't get anywhere else.
Yeah. Including go ahead, Jonathan.
Boris said and Max Pappas 2010 as well.
Yeah, and that's exactly the point that I was about to bring up. Actually, yes, a lot of great moments during the time in Montreal. It would definitely be wonderful to go back there someday. And Jonathan, to bounce off the point you were saying about going where the fans are, and whenever we bring up the topics, the controversial topics of race and the Middle Eastern countries like Qatar and Saudi Arabia, we're not dismissing the fact that they don't have race fans there. I'm sure there's a lot of race fans in Saudi Arabia and Qatar, and as much as a lot of us have a sour taste in our mouths that motorsports racing series decide to race in those type of countries who've committed atrocities against human beings. At the same time, I'm actually really happy that children in those countries are able to see motorsports. Otherwise, they wouldn't be able to. So I guess that's one positive of racing in those countries, that if it wasn't for these series coming here, then I look little kids, especially women in these countries, they're not able to see this type of stuff that they watch from afar.
For sure.
Think back to the early days of Formula One in Bahrain. I know there's only one main grandstand there, but that was generally not very well filled in the early days of Formula One in Bahrain. So now it is, and we've got a lot of like expat Brits over there that go to the Grand Prix and go to Abu Dhabi as well, and all of those races in that region. But you have to build, I guess, to give them credit. The other side of the coin, they have to build a fan base if they don't have it. So you can't start with nothing and hope that it turns into something straight away.
Adam says Supercars NASCAR doubleheader at Watkins Glen or Road America. Ooh, don't get me too excited. That sounds good. Wow. Man. All right. So with that said, here is Matt White with our latest grid EPI update.
Yeah, thank you, Jonathan. Busy weekend of talking sports car racing. Busy weekend of sports car racing it was. Over this neck of the woods, mostly in Europe over the weekend. And we'll start with the biggest story of the weekend, and that was on the Sunday race in GT World Challenge Europe that we were just talking about in the Sprint Cup. They were at Misano over the weekend, and Valentino Rossi is a car winner for the very first time at one of his racetracks, really. It's not too far away from his home. And the Sea of Yellow was out at Misano at the weekend, and he and Maxime Martin got their first victory together, Rossi's first win in the championship on Sunday for WRT in the number 46, of course, BMW. So that was a great scene on Sunday. They didn't go fair so well on Saturday. Timur Bogoslawski and Raffaele Marcello winning the Saturday race. Up at the Nürburgring, second week in a row for the ADAC GT Masters. They were also in action last week at the Norrisring. This weekend at the Nürburgring, as I said, and another win on Saturday, much like last weekend, for Salman Owega and Elias Sepinen. Benjamin Hites and Marco Mappelli were the winners on Sunday. We had the latest round of the European Le Mans Series at Paul Ricard, only their second race of the year after their Imola round pre-Le Mans was cancelled, and a race which saw the lead change 3 times in the last 10 minutes. And Kiffin Simpson, James Allen and Alex Lynn came out on top to win overall. The Pro-Am winner in P2, which was one of the cars that led inside the last 10 minutes, Sally Yolop, Charlie Eastwood and Louis Delatraz picking up the win in Pro-Am. Unfortunately, just missing out on the overall win. Jacques Wolfe, Anthony Ducan and Jean-Louis Foubert were the winners in LMP3, and Christian Reed, Julian Andlauer and Gianmarco Leverato were the winners for Proton Porsche in GT-Am. And 2 races for the GT World Challenge Asia Championship at Suzuka at the weekend. Klaus Bachler and the Thai in Fuvasak were the winners on Saturday, and Danny Ukandela and Anthony Liu were the winners on Sunday. So here is the updated top 10 for the grid EPI, and Brendan Hartley is still the point leader. None of the WEC racers scoring this weekend. We have had a new entry, though, with Rene Binder popping himself up into 5th. He was second in the ELMS race in P2 at the weekend, so he slots in there in 5th position, just knocking Antonio Garcia and Jordan Taylor down 1 spot. We have now gone through 83 of the 150 plus races in the EPI, so we've broken the back of the season. We're heading full steam ahead towards the end of the year. There's the top 50 as it stands. Plenty more moving and shaking coming this weekend. There's now 725 people that are on the board in the EPI championship for 2023. And by the way, just for a couple of stats to throw you, Lucas Stoltz has started the most races. He is on 26 starts already for the season. He's 177th in the championship. And the top female continues to be Lilo Wadu. She is 283rd in the standings on 4.43 points. 3 more rounds of the EPI to come this weekend. GT World Challenge is back again after their second race in as many weeks. Staying in Japan, they were at Motegi this weekend for another 2 races. IMSA at Lime Rock on Saturday. More about that shortly in Pick a Winner. And talking of race championships that have gone to places that so a lot of people are happy about, the British GT Championship hasn't gone to Spa for its normal away day trip. They're at Portimao this weekend in Portugal at the Algarve. So plenty more EPI races to come this weekend, and we'll update you on the results and the championship standings next week. But time to hand back to Kobe for some more news.
Thanks, Matt. With the IMSA WeatherTech Sports Car Championship eliminating the LMP3 class at the end of the year, Sean Creech Motorsport will move up to LMP2. To everyone's surprise, they won't be entering the category with the highly popular Orca 07, which has become the dominant or really the only LMP2 chassis globally. Instead, after fielding the Ligier JS P3 for the last few seasons, they'll stick with the constructor in 2024 by using the Ligier JS P217. This chassis has already been shipped over from Europe and is expected to arrive in the port of Miami later this week. Team principal Sean Creech said they wanted to stay in the prototype class, and the existing relationship with Ligier opened the door to continuing their partnership. LMP2 runs the same number of races as LMP3, so similar logistics. Creech felt that it made sense to enter this category next year because of that. Graphic courtesy of Sean Creech Motorsport. For a 3rd consecutive race, Meyer Shank Racing will head to the racetrack without Simon Pagenaud. According to the IndyCar medical team, Pagenaud still isn't ready to return to competition as he continues to recover from that violent crash a few weeks ago at Mid-Ohio. Once again, Connor Daly will drive the number 60 Honda for the Hy-Vee doubleheader race week in Iowa Speedway. In Daly's last 4 starts at Iowa, although the race results didn't necessarily turn out well, he started no worse than 3rd place. He said he's grateful for Michael Shank and Jim Meyer for calling him up to substitute again and considers Iowa one of his favorite tracks. Ex-Formula One driver Nicholas Latifi has broken his silence for the first time since he lost his seat at Williams to Logan Sargent. After Latifi was out of F1, there were several reports that he was exploring options to compete in potentially IndyCar or the World Endurance Championship, but time passed and we've heard nothing from him until now. Latifi announced that he's stepping away from motorsports for the time being, and he will focus his attention on getting his MBA degree at university. And right here, here's a letter from Nicholas Latifi saying, "Hey everyone, I know I've been quiet on social media this year. I've seen plenty of messages from supporters worldwide asking what I've been up to and what my plans will be for the future. As of recently, I have news I'd like to share with y'all. I decided very early on in the year that I wouldn't have any racing plans for 2023. It definitely felt strange not having the same routine I've been in for over half my life, knowing that I wouldn't be behind the wheel of a race car. This year, I obviously began to think about what could be next for me, whether that involved racing or something completely different. I decided that for the immediate future, I wanted to take some time and pursue a different avenue and focus on a different path. Growing up, I always had a keen interest in the world of business, and I always said it was something I would have studied at university if I had not gone down the racing route. With that in mind and knowing I might be taking a break from racing, I decided I wanted to pursue an MBA degree and focus on something that would transform the next phase of my life. And MBA was always something that I had contemplated doing post-racing life, even if that had been into my late 30s or early 40s. And right here, Nicholas Latifi continue on by saying that making the decision early on in the year that an MBA was what I wanted to pursue, I began devoting my time to research in business schools and seeing which ones would be a good fit, preparing for an application for them and studying for the GMAT, a test required by most business schools to go along with your application. This was not an easy process and took many months. Anyone who has experienced the journey of applying to business school knows how difficult it can be. After a 5-month journey from starting the process, I'm pleased to say that my candidacy was accepted for a place in the MBA program at London Business School, which I'll be starting in August of this year. This decision may seem surprising to a lot of people. Transition to a different racing category might have seemed like the most obvious move. However, I knew there would always be live post racing at some point. I decided that now might be a good time to prepare myself for that. This is not necessarily a goodbye to the racing world forever. Racing has been my life since the age of 13 and still something I am extremely passionate about. I haven't missed watching an F1 race yet this season, and I think that's very telling there from Nicholas Latifi. However, I felt like this year was the right time to explore and pursue other avenues in my life. I'm very much looking forward to this next adventure and want to thank everyone who has supported me throughout my career thus far. I hope I can continue to have your support as I take some time to pursue a different path. Signed there by Nicholas Latifi, and we certainly want to wish him well in his future motorsports endeavors. Got a comment here from Racing World TV saying hello, and you say very admirable and Nicholas Latifi, wishing the best. We definitely echo those sentiments as well. And now moving on to our next story, NASCAR driver Ryan Vargas is joining 3F Racing as the Director of Team and Driver Development. Vargas will also serve as the reserve driver once the team's NASCAR Cup Series program gets underway. In the last year, Vargas said he's gotten to know the owners, Dennis and Paul, who have experience in the European racing scene in series such as DTM and GT World Challenge. 3F Racing also plans to enter a car for Vargas in a late model stock race at Hickory Motor Speedway later this year. The team has partnered with Lee Falk Racing as they'll begin working with 16-year-old Max Mason, a former Australian Open wheel and NASCAR Wheeling Euro Series driver. And your graphic right here, courtesy of 3F Racing. And I know Casey Campbell's gonna like hearing this next story because it's some ARCA news, and that's because Taylor Reimer will make her ARCA Menard Series debut with Venturini Motorsports in the Dutch Boy 100 at the Illinois State Fairgrounds Dirt Track. She enters ARCA as the winningest female driver in the history of Port City Raceway at 23 years old. Despite all of the early success in her racing career, she took a hiatus from the sport for a while to focus on her studies. Reimer graduated from the University of Oklahoma with honors, earning a degree in health and education science, including a minor in business. During her time at Oklahoma, she was a part of the cheerleading team and she ended up winning the 2021 Universal Cheerleading Association Division 1A National Championship. In 2021, she won a heat race in her first career USAC event. Later in May 2022, she became the first female driver to win a national midget feature race in the Extreme Outlaw Midget Series at Millbrook Speedway. A lot of people in North Carolina know that place. Reimer says she grew up racing on dirt and admits stock car racing will definitely be a learning curve for her. However, she's tested a late model several times and she's felt more comfortable each time in the car. Photo courtesy of Venturini Motorsports. And last but not least, Nick DeFries. He finally broke his silence since he got dropped from his AlphaTauri F1C. And as you can see right here, the Freeze said a short note from him. After recent events, I decided to take some time for myself away from social media, which I will continue to do. I would like to thank Red Bull and Scuderia AlphaTauri for the opportunity to live my dream. Of course, it hurts that the F1 chance I dreamed of for so long ended prematurely, but life is not a destination, it's a journey. And sometimes you have to take the hard road to get to where you want to be. I'm grateful for our privileged lives, proud of our journey and my family. This is just another experience. We move on and look forward to the next chapter. Thank you to everyone for your kind and encouraging messages in the last week. It's been heartwarming to feel your support. P.S. I received some interesting articles about things I've said in the last week. For clarity, I haven't spoken to any media, and for the time being, I'll continue to enjoy some me time. Wishing you all a nice summer. So statement right there from Nick DeFries, who's getting ready for the next stage of his life and his racing career. Now, after talking a lot at you for a handful of minutes, I'm going to hand it over. I need a quick break, so I'm going to hand it over to Matt White for everyone's favorite game, Pick a Winner.
Before we get to that, I've actually got two more stories. Sam Hunt Racing has announced that Sage Karam will be running for them in the Xfinity Series at Road America. So that's coming up next weekend. Looking forward to seeing how Sage gets on. And on the De Vries thing, story I've heard potentially that Norman Nato might be on the Formula E chopping block, and that Nick De Vries is going to be lined up to go in at Nissan alongside Sesha Fenestraz. So that's the kind of latest rumour mill from Formula E. But as Kobe said, it's time for our prediction game. Pick a Winner is back. Kobe continues to streak ahead after another amazing week of picks, and he's now got a 4-point lead over Alex there at the top of the standings. We've got 3 races to pick from tonight, and one of them is, much like last week, SRX at Stafford. They're back for a second running at Stafford Speedway. We brought you the qualifying news earlier. Thank you, Casey, for that. I will start off our SRX picks, and I will go with Tony Stewart.
Ooh, Tony Stewart. That's a good pick there, Matt. Personally, I think when you look at just last week's race and you look at what's coming up with Stafford, I think Brad Keselowski is a good pick. I think he's a good one. I think he's gonna have a little better race. So
all I'm gonna say is 2 words: modifieds mainly. I'm gonna go with the driver who was actually announced. I believe it was during the SRX season opener. It was either during the race or slightly afterward. I think Ryan Preece is going to get the job done. Many of the fans up there in the Northeast know Ryan Preece from his time when he was racing up there in the modifieds before he decided to move on to the NASCAR National Series. And I think that one of their local heroes, Preece, is going to get the job done.
That's a great pick. I like that.
Yeah, I didn't realize Ryan was in. Otherwise, I would have picked him. But I've locked myself in with Tony Stewart now. Hey ho, he's on the front row for Heat 1. WRC back this weekend. They're in Estonia for the latest round of their championship after their little summer break they've had after Rally Safari. It's the first of 2 very fast gravel events in a row, with Finland to come next month. I am going to stick my neck out and say we're going to have a new winner on the year. It's going to be a Hyundai, and it's going to be Esa-Pekka Lappi to get the job done.
I'm going to be boring. I'm going to say Cal Rovanperä. He's going to get done.
Yeah, I'm definitely going to go with you as well, Jonathan. I think Cal Rovanperä is going to get the job done in Rally Estonia, and Adam Lemry is also agreeing with me for SRX at Stafford, the second consecutive race on a row there at this track. You think that the modified mainly guy, Ryan Preece, is going to get the job done?
To see how that goes down. Yeah, I was going to pick Rovanperä, but kind of much like Verstappen in F1, it's a bit of a boring pick. And we've got an interesting race to pick from as well for our third one tonight, and that is, as I mentioned earlier, IMSA back on their summer tour. They're at Lime Rock Park on Saturday. It's a Friday-Saturday meeting, as it always is at Lime Rock, and it's a GT-only race. The GTD Pros and the GTDs in action. So that is going to be a fast-paced race, frenetic as always around there. So we don't get to pick the normal hypercar options because they're on a break. Adam picking Rovanperä there for Estonia. That starts on Friday, of course. I'm going to go for the Barnecote and Hawksworth Lexus to win on Saturday at Lime Rock.
Woo. Man, I'm boring tonight, aren't I? I was going to go Brian Sellers and Madison Snow there for the win.
I promise I'm not copying you, Jonathan, but that's who I'm picking as well. Then the number 1 Paul Miller Racing BMW, Brian Sellers, Madison Snow. They're having quite a season so far. You want them to win several races, and I think they're going to add another one to the win column. But this Lime Rock race, GT only, and then we got VIR later on in the summer. It's really interesting because you no longer have GTLM and GTD, which had they were built one set of cars built to GT spec regulation, and other to GT3 with the GTE's been a lot faster. So you would typically pick the all-pro driver lineup to win, but as we've seen so far since we switched to GT3 based cars in both classes, you can really see either or finish on the top. So whether you pick a GTD Pro car or a regular GTD car, any one of those could win overall. I think there's certainly going to be a lot of bragging rights going to Lime Rock Park and then Virginia International Raceway later on in the summer, and it's always been interesting as you mentioned, Matt, talking about the race been on Fridays and Saturday. There's a law in place up there in the Northeast where they cannot race on Sunday, so that's why you always see whenever you see a racing series happen, they're already racing on that Friday or Saturday, and we've even seen race on a Monday there. But for some reason that I don't understand, they're just not allowed to race on a Sunday up there. And Adam Lemry says down in the comments below he agrees with our pick for IMSA. So I guess Adam, you're going to lock in the number 1 BMW of Sellers and Snow. And next, Matt, going to turn it over to you for Hots and Knots.
Yeah, the GTD, if that does happen and your picks are correct, they'll get an EPI bonus because they are the top rated class as such going into the weekend. The reason that Lime Rock is never run on a Sunday is because there is a church not so far away from the racetrack as far as I'm aware. So that's why we have no Sunday running at Lime Rock Park. Watch the Trans Am race from last month, a couple of weeks ago. That was a good show. Time for hots and nots. I've got an absolute laundry list, so I'm going to keep mine for a second, and I'm going to open the floor for Jonathan for his hots and nots for the week.
Very nice. Well, I'm excited to see your laundry list. I'll throw a few out there, but first of all, I want to say a hot to Christian Lundgaard getting his first ever IndyCar win. I think very admirable performance. Led a lot of laps. Got the win at Toronto. Also want to stay up in Canada and give a shout out to another hot, Alex Tagliani. I don't know if he saw the video on social media showing his family up in the stands, cheering him on as he crossed the start-finish line, but that was very sweet and awesome to see Tagliani continue to get his due diligence in NASCAR, because I know he never won like a NASCAR race down here, but I mean, 12 wins up there in Pinty's. I mean, that's awesome to see. Hot, the JGR drivers, Martin Truex Jr., John Hunter Nemechek, each put on a classic butt whooping up in New Hampshire. So they were hot. Not we're going to keep it positive. Another hot. I thought Tony Breidinger did very well in the ARCA race, is continuing to show improvement. And also Luke Fenhouse as well for getting that absolutely remarkable overtime win. I mean, William Sawalch had led every lap up until that point, and then Luke Fenhouse just took it from his grasp. So big hot there. All right.
Any nots
What's your
from you? You do your nots. I don't know. I'll go through my list in total.
Okay. Overall, it was a pretty positive weekend, and nothing really stood out as a not. I think maybe some of the restarts, we saw that in the Xfinity Series race, in New Hampshire, where the restarts caused a huge pileup, took out Parker Kligerman. I think that's a not. I think that's something NASCAR has to continue to fine tune. Otherwise, no, I thought it was a very positive weekend. It was a good weekend. I do want to see the first article of clothing that is coming from your laundry list, though, Matt.
Well, you've pulled a couple out there in hot, which was Christian Lundgaard. Excellent. No, love a new winner. And he may have got pole in a mixed up session in qualifying with the rain on Saturday, but he dominated that race, as did Martin Truex on Monday at New Hampshire. What a great crowd they had for a Monday race. That was cool to see. But yeah, Truex and Lundgaard definitely hot from the weekend. Another hot go. Oh, go on.
I just want to jump in here and say we have just found out here. I know Colby's been looking at it, but I just saw while I was poking at my Twitter. It looks like Shane van Gisbergen will be driving the number 91 Project 91 car at Indianapolis on August 13th. It was just announced on their social media. Kobe probably has more.
Yeah. Shane van Gisbergen making another NASCAR Cup Series start this year. Project 91 Trackhouse, that's that same program that he ran in his one-off win at the Chicago Street Course, and now the NASCAR Cup Series field is going to have to deal with two Supercar stars, Brodie Kostecki and Shane van Gisbergen. And don't forget, it's a doubleheader weekend with the NTT IndyCar Series on the other side. And IndyCar got Scott McLaughlin as well, so there are going to be a lot of Supercars flavor at the Brickyard this year. I'm sure that this is going to certainly excite a lot of people. See SVG coming back in, see if he can try to go 2 for 2 and stay perfect in his very short NASCAR career, and also see him willing with Brodie Kostecki, who he goes to battle with weekly in Supercars. Starting with you, Matt, and then Jonathan. I'll let you guys say what you think about Shane van Gisbergen coming back to make another NASCAR start, especially going up against his fellow countryman and Supercars rival Brodie Kostecki.
Yeah, that's box office. Van Gisbergen versus Kostecki, but not in Supercars. That's cool. And it's at Indianapolis, which is, the Holy Grail. I didn't get to watch the Chicago race live because it was on so late in the day for us in Europe. So this one's on at a much more manageable time. So that's going to be cool. And they're going to put on a show, hopefully, at Indianapolis in the next couple of weeks. We were talking about it before we went on the air. We kind of knew this was about to drop. We were deciding when and whether Shane, what race would he do if he came back. And this is kind of the only one. If you're thinking, why isn't he doing the Roval? Because he's got track experience of the Roval, because he had that day's testing in the car prior to Chicago. The Roval race is on the same weekend as the Bathurst 1000, so that rules him out of doing that. But excellent to see him come back. And if after 5 laps, those two are 10 seconds up the road at the start of the race, him and Kostecki, don't be surprised.
Man, I want to go and just have Justin Marks be a pinch hitter on the poker table for me, because he indicated that there were no more races for Project 91 scheduled. And sure enough, here we go. And obviously, like, that was after Chicago and the post-race availability. I'm sure a lot of things have changed since then. But one exciting opportunity. We're going to get to see 2 Australian supercar drivers like battle it out here in NASCAR with the Gen 7. Plus, can't forget, Kamui Kobayashi is going to be in that race as well. I mean, what a treat it is to be able to have 3 international drivers just like that. The only thing I wish Jimmy Johnson was going to be in that race in the 84. That way we get to see him as well. But I think it's an absolute treat that no matter who you are, you should be very excited for what you have coming up at Indianapolis.
Absolutely right. Upright Fossils, there's definitely going to be sitting in the turn 7, 8, 9 chicane. Yeah, it's going to be on. I hope that we know SVG doesn't like doing media, but I hope he and Scott McLaughlin can get together and do some kind of Bus Bros segment over the Indianapolis weekend with Joseph Newgarden. That'll be fun. Back to my hot list, of which that Van Gisbergen news has just gone straight to the top. Where do I get to? Toronto mentioned Lundgaard. I want to meet Chip Ganassi's decal man and give him a very big pat on the back for helping Alex Palou second place with his front wing that was hanging on just by the stickers. That was excellent. And when everyone thought he qualified 15th and they'd have a good day in the points, here he comes back to finish second. Weather at the weekend and around the world, just hot or wet wherever you were. And in Europe, it was sweltering. More on that in knots. Rossi's win, which I mentioned in the EPI update, just great to see him winning again, and this time with 4 wheels underneath him, not 2. Casey agrees. Kamui, SVG, and Brodie in the one race. That's just absolute lights and fireworks and things going on.
I also forgot Jenson Button's going to be in the 15 as well, so that's another factor with Indy.
Yes, he is, isn't he? So a stout Honda man in Jenson Button versus Toyota's general manager Kamui Kobayashi. That'll be fun. My last hot on the list is Michael McDowell. No one's talking about how good Michael McDowell ran again at the weekend, and he looks like he might be able to point his way in, which will be cool. And he got in last year into the playoffs with his Daytona 500 win, but what a great year front row are having with Michael McDowell. So that's the hot list. The not list is just as long. Max Verstappen, not. If anyone saw what he did in the Spa virtual race at the weekend when he rage quitted and bumped someone off at the top of the hill at Spa, not what you want from the world champion, really. The social media, I'll put it on my list as social media badness, if that makes sense. If anyone's seen the IndyCar, the girl that went to the IndyCar race in her Ferrari gear thinking she was going to a Grand Prix. Now, you've either really messed up or you've done that for the hits. And if you've done it for the hits, you've done a cracking job, because you went viral with that one. Well done indeed. Made up words in motorsport. I can get undercut and overcut. We get that. But front nose, everyone seems to be using front nose at the moment. Front nose isn't a thing. It's just a nose. And instead of onboard cameras, offboard cameras. What's an offboard? What is an offboard? It's just an exterior shot. Anthony Davidson loves it during F1. I forgot to mention it last week. And as we go to Hungary at the weekend, I thought I'd bring it up. Watch out for offboard during the Formula One coverage at the weekend. Yes, Matthew is also very excited about Indianapolis. The mayor of Indianapolis is very excited to get back to IMS. Upright Fossil says that weekend has been on my bucket list, IndyCar and NASCAR, with others for 3 days at IMS. Yes, I want to go to that, but I fear this may be the last time that we see it. Trackhouse needs to bring SVG to Watkins Glen. Unfortunately, Watkins Glen clashes with the next round of, well, not the next round, the round after of Supercars at the Bend. So Indy Road Course was his only option in terms of a non-oval race for the end of the year, Rod, unfortunately. But it's great to have SVG at Indianapolis. World Superbike were at Imola at the weekend, continuing my knots. They had to shorten the Sunday race because of the weather, and it was so hot. And the one man that really benefits in the long races is Alvaro Bautista, because he's very light and he can manage his tyre. So he didn't want the race shortened, of course. And then he fell off at the first corner and it didn't matter. So that was unfortunate for Alvaro, but he's still got a massive championship lead. The Toronto Whoops section that they added at the penultimate corner of the weekend with that drain cover. What is that all about? Who signed off on that? That was shocking, as was Penske's strategy at the weekend. Scott McLaughlin should have followed Christian Lundgaard, and Will Power ran out of fuel, or had to come in at the end of or the start of the last lap and ran out of fuel. So Penske had a bit of a shocker on strategy. I mentioned Imola. It's an hour up the road from Misano in Italy, where we had World Superbike at Imola and GT World Challenge at Misano. That's just bad scheduling. If I'd have been in the Italian region, I would have gone to both of those, or none, because they're on at the same time. Alex Bowman and Chase Elliott's seasons don't get any better, do they? That's another knot. They've just been absent without leave since they were absent without leave. And all of the drama that happened in Rome in Formula E, the championship challengers colliding on Sunday after that crazy crash on Saturday. If anyone hasn't seen Sebastian Buemi's helmet cam footage of that Saturday crash, search it out, because it is scary, scary, scary. Matthew says we can only hope that this is the last. Well, I don't hope, because I want to go to one, but I know what he's getting at, because he wants to bring Guard 400 back. But yeah, that is a good ticket. Upright Fossil, I hope you enjoy. We've got a couple of weeks to get there before we get to the race, but I hope you enjoy. Scott McLaughlin's strategy. He has had some good ones, Rod, but this weekend he was really on the wrong end of the stick in strategy land. In Toronto, I think that is the end of my laundry list. It's been out on the line and it's now dry.
And I agree with your not when it comes to the weather. We absolutely just need a dry weekend. And we're heading to Pocono, which is notorious for its rain. So I don't know what to expect, but we'll see. I just pray for a dry weekend for NASCAR one of these weekends.
Hopefully so. We've got all three races covered for NASCAR, by the way, on the Ultimate Sports Radio Network over the weekend. Trucks, Xfinity, and the Cup race, which I'm going to be part of the coverage for. And just a quick note, Josh is back with us next week, and he's back on over the weekend on his channel with F1 and IndyCar as well. So hello to Josh if you're watching. We're looking forward to you be back on the show next week. I think that's pretty much it. We padded enough because we knew that news was coming at the top of the hour. So I think, Kobe, it's time for you to take us home.
Yep, unfortunately, we're all out of time for tonight. For some reason, my mouse is acting really weird. So I guess it's a great time to end this show, since my technology decides to just want to fall apart all at once. But taking a look at our upcoming schedule, on Saturday, we're back on the air. Grid Live pre-race, noon Eastern, regular times. Sunday, Grid Live wrap-up, 90 minutes after the NASCAR Cup Series race at Pocono Raceway. Monday, 7 p.m. Eastern Time, Grid Live Encore. A full recap of all the action at the Tricky Triangle, the races in ARCA, Trucks and Xfinity, and more. Please be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Thank you for helping us reach the milestone of 650 subscribers. Now help us reach our new goal of 700 subscribers on the road to 1,000. See, we've really been picking up a lot of traction lately, so thank you for all of the people who've continued to stick with us all this time, and the new people as well. Welcome to this ride. I hope you won't ever hop off. Don't forget to hit the bell icon to get all the notifications. Follow us on all our social media platforms, and visit gridranking.com for the latest race recap articles. Consider taking 5 minutes after our show tonight to invest in Grid Network through Patreon. You can join Colin, Mark, Deschelle, Robin, and David investing in Grid Network each month. We encourage you to join the amazing group of people who keep us on the air. Once we hit $500 per month, we can start expanding our coverage by adding new members to our team and having our team on site to cover more races. Link in the video description below. If you want to do a one-time donation, click on the Buy Me a Coffee link. You can get your name on the board and invest as much as you want, as often as you want. Consider buying a specific on-air personality a cup of coffee, and they'll certainly thank you here on the air. And before I sign off, Upright Fossil has a few more comments saying looking forward to this weekend. Yeah, lots of racing happening this weekend all over the world. Grid Live wrap up and Encore is going to be pretty busy with all of the things that are going to happen this racing weekend. Appreciate you as well, Upright Fossil, really happy to see you sticking around for the whole show tonight. And with that said, for Matt White from Grid Endurance Performance Index and Jonathan Fiel from the Racing Experts, I'm Kobe Lambert from the Pole to Finish. Thank you all for watching. We'll see you next time. Good night.
Thank you for watching us right here on YouTube. Be sure to subscribe and check out some of our other videos, including Life on the Grid, where we interview folks from the motorsports industry. Thank you for watching. We'll see you next time.